time is running out.
I just wanted to be a sailor.
Time to listen.
And I would like to do it again if I could.
Time to learn.
I'm 102.
Our time with the generation who stood up to save the world is almost gone.
The thing that comes to my mind is how young they were. You're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old boys.
World War II.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Soldiers and civilians wiped from existence. In the end, more than 65 million souls lost to the ravages of a world war.
That's 10 million a year. That is 20,000 people every single day of the year for 6 straight years.
Now is the time to listen to our World War II veterans, to learn from those who fought for all of us 75 years ago. This is a First Coast News special presentation, Voices of Valor, sponsored by ViStar Credit Union, proud supporter of the military and veterans since 1952. From Naval Station Mayport aboard USS The Sullivans, here are First Coast News anchors Jeannie Blaylock and Lewis Turner.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us, and we are honored as we mark the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II.
Welcome to Voices of Valor. To begin, let's take you back.
I was born in 1925.
A little fella on a trike. Then, age 13, as a paperboy on his spike.
Rode my bicycle along and hollered, "Extra, extra!"
Poland, September 1939. 34 million inhabitants, crushed, scattered, and enslaved.
It is the beginning of World War II.
My name is Kenneth Bender.
And no way he saw the next shock coming.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press.
December 7th, 1941.
Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
A date which will live in infamy.
I thought, well, the Japanese are so stupid, we'll wipe them off in a day or two. Didn't quite happen that way.
America was no military powerhouse. Dr. Rob Citino, the senior historian at the National World War II Museum.
So if we look at the size of the U.S. Army in 1939, now that's the beginning of World War II in Europe, we were somewhere around 17th in the world in the size of our army.
But President Franklin Roosevelt was watching the war in Europe.
We had the first peacetime draft in U.S. history in 1940. We had maybe 1 million men under arms by 1941. In the course of the war, some 16 million American men and women put on the uniform.
And on the home front?
The United States built more ships in 1941 than Japan built in the whole war. They had just picked a fight with an economy that was 10 times bigger than their own.
Or as Hollywood put it in Tora, Tora, Tora,
眠れる巨人を起こし奮い立たせる結果を招いたも同然である。
Across America, factories totally retooled.
Remington going from typewriters to 45 semi-automatic pistols.
And in Michigan,
Henry Ford was a guy who liked to challenge.
An assembly line more than a mile long.
The experts said to Henry Ford, there's no way you'll ever be able to build a factory that will produce a B-24 in a single day. Henry Ford said, just watch me.
A B-24 in one day, then one every hour. And Staff Sergeant Bender was a gunner on a B-29, 22 recon missions over Japan. Then,
a short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima.
It was a relief for Sergeant Bender.
In our barracks, we were hollering and hitting each other on the back.
Did you have any idea that there'd be a second bomb?
No.
Just 5 hours after the bomb, Sergeant Bender and top brass fly over the center of Nagasaki.
It was just a circle of fire.
hours and hours in the air to take pictures.
We first went in at about 30,000 feet because we didn't know whether or not there was radiation.
This young sergeant seeing with his own eyes Nagasaki, and that's not all. Japan surrenders, and then
World War II in the Pacific. 4 years of bloody hell came to an end here.
One of the most important days in the history of our country, and you were there.
Yes, well,
he was right here in his B-29 over Tokyo Bay, Japan signing the unconditional surrender on the USS Missouri.
They boarded in silence.
It's theater orchestrated by General MacArthur, who had a pretty good eye for this sort of thing. Japanese delegation comes on ship, the entire crew of the Missouri kind of standing there, not in their dress whites, but in their kind of khakis. MacArthur said, we'll accept the surrender in the same uniform we fought this war in. Pretty good stuff. There are hundreds, 300 ships in Tokyo Bay.
But the planes were told stay out of sight and then roar in.
We flew in what they called trail, which was one behind each other, so that it strung out for a long time.
And the message for Japan:
don't mess with the United States.
And just after the ceremony,
I could see the table.
General MacArthur signed. Eyewitnesses saw his hands tremble, bearing witness to the end of the worst war in human history.
Oh, it just makes me feel how wonderful it is to be an American. I was just awful proud of the whole United States.
And Sergeant Bender, we cannot honor you enough.
I'm going to have you sign an autograph for me.
Oh, my goodness. You're making too much out of this.
No, I'm not.
Oh, so humble.
This day made my year.
And so valuable, the few still alive to teach us true valor.
Really is an incredible story, and here we are coming to you on board a ship ported right here in Naval Station Mayport, USS the Sullivans. It is an unusual name with such rich history associated with it, connected to World War II, and also 5 brothers who would not serve unless they could stick together.
It all started with 5 brothers who insisted on sticking together. The Sullivan boys, George, Francis, Joseph, Madison, and Albert, heading into the Navy to fight during World War II.
They insisted that they stay together. So if they were going to serve, the deal was we stick together. They had to be at the same command on the same ship when they went to war.
George wrote a letter to his recruiter begging, insisting that all 5 brothers serve on the same ship. Well, they'd get that assignment and a deployment aboard the USS Juno.
Juno was hit by a torpedo. Being inside and confined to those areas was such a violent reaction, I can't even imagine.
During the Battle of Guadalcanal, a Japanese sub hit the brothers' ship. 3 of them died instantly, Francis, Joseph, and Madison. 2 made it to the life rafts.
You had Albert and George. Now, Al perished the same day he made it to the water. George reportedly made it for about 4 days.
The story only gets sadder as George, overcome with hypothermia and grief of losing all of his brothers, let himself go into the water and was never seen again. A tragic story of World War II, a ship losing all but 10 of its sailors, a single family losing 5 children, a mother who had to get unbelievable news.
You can obviously see the pain that she's in and the hurt in her eyes.
Chief Petty Officer Dustin Hokelberg knows the brothers' story by heart, being stationed on the destroyer that bears their name at Naval Station Mayport, USS the Sullivans. That's part of the deal.
Having served on the Sullivans for nearly 10 years, it becomes a family. I could not imagine losing my shipmates, let alone my family members and brothers, the way that they did.
A modern-day ship built to deploy and destroy during 21st century conflicts and war.
It leaves incredibly fast, it has an incredible reach, and if it flies, it dies.
Yet, USS the Sullivans and its crew is forever connected to World War II and the indelible mark left by the Sullivan boys printed all over the ship.
The We Stick Together namesake is huge. we're going to be together or we're not coming. So for our namesake, everything we do is together. We stick together, thick and thin, regardless of what the mission or the problem set is, we stick together.
It is an incredibly sad story, but one that all the sailors who work aboard here take extraordinarily seriously as they serve. Now, for a story of wartime romance, let's check in with Jeannie.
Lou, it is a flip of the coin. That's how this next story begins. But then we plunge into one of the most treacherous jobs in the entire war. Ever heard of flying the hump?
Well,
It's okay.
don't do as well. Uh-oh, this time it came out tails.
Uh-oh. Oh, you gotta hear about the coin flip and the girl. Now, who is that?
That's me,
But first, let's go back
Major Herbert L. Soybert.
to the legendary Flying Tigers in their P-40s.
Flying Tigers, the famous American volunteer group, wing their way across China for the last time as volunteers.
They're known as the AVG, American Volunteer Group. They're better known as the Flying Tigers. It's one of the most famous insignia in the entire war.
Their goal to save China from Japan.
The Japanese invaded China in 1937, 4 full years before Pearl Harbor.
And in case you don't know this part of history, brace yourself.
The Japanese described their own strategy in China as kill all, loot all, burn all.
This baby terrified, alone after Japanese bombs, but it gets much worse. The massacre, the rape of Nanjing, the numbers slaughtered in just several weeks.
They probably killed 200,000 or 300,000 civilians in kind of an orgy of violence.
American newspapers carried the stories, Japanese officers with samurai swords.
And actually, having beheading contests, and some of the footage is quite sickening. Anyone will tell you it's not as easy as it sounds. Sometimes you have to hack away for a long period of time to sever a head from a human body.
The Japanese terrorized the Chinese. Man or woman didn't matter.
Pregnant Chinese women being disemboweled, quite literally, the baby being cut out of her womb.
It is sickening, but it's history, and it helps us understand why pilots like Herb Soybert are such heroes.
I ended up as a lieutenant colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel Soybert flew the hump to get critical supplies to the Flying Tigers to save the Chinese people from surrender to Japan, critical to us in World War II. But the mission for this lieutenant colonel.
How dangerous was the hump? Let me count the ways.
The route from India to China over the Himalayas.
I was flying along, and all of a sudden I hit this rough air, and before I knew it, I had lost 2,000 feet. It was that rough, so the first flight, it was kind of scary.
Nowhere to land, everywhere to crash.
We would fly at about 17,000 feet, and then the mountains got up to a little over 15,000. And they overloaded our aircraft so that we could barely get up to 17,000 feet.
Lieutenant Colonel Soybert flew C-47s, his mission always treacherous.
That is for 50 flights over the hump.
But sadly enough, history has never really given hero status to Soybert and his fellow pilots.
There's no, surprising your opponent crawling up to him in the middle of the night with a knife in your teeth. It's a supply flight, and no one's ever going to make a movie called Supplying Private Ryan.
But Soybert knows he did his part.
I've always wondered, what did it feel like that the whole world, pretty much, was at war?
It was a lot worse than a lot of people realized.
It was a scary time, but what a time to be born.
August 1717.
1917. And so some quick math, you are how young?
I'm 102.
102. You got to be proud of that.
Well, I feel lucky.
Lucky, he says, to serve our country, and lucky
I was just standing on the street corner
to spot a pretty girl. Now you get to hear the coin flip story.
I asked her for a date, and she No, I don't even know you.
But a dapper young military pilot never gives up.
And I finally, in desperation, said, well, how about me flipping a coin if it turns up heads? So she kind of went along with that. It turned up heads. I lucked out. I won the lottery.
And from this greatest generation, what incredible service. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Soylent.
World War II created modern America. Today we live in an extremely wealthy nation, despite some current problems we may have, extremely powerful, the most influential country in terms of global affairs. So it's entirely possible to say that coming out of World War II, the United States of America was the most powerful country in the world. In fact, the most powerful country the world had ever seen.
Welcome back to Voices of Valor. I'm Jeannie Blaylock. You know, when we talk with these veterans, they all say the same thing. They are so proud still that they served our country. But for some, it came with a slap in the face.
September the 12th, 1912.
Yes, indeed, the year Mr. C.C. Clano Cornelius Stevens was born. So how old is he?
107.
An Army veteran, the pride of Waycross, Georgia. And how old do you feel?
7.
Young at heart, sharp as a tack.
After 2 years of college, I was prepared to have a teaching certificate.
He taught for 8 years, and then 1943 got drafted.
I came home and found that letter of greeting. And to Fort Benning I went.
His job, teach illiterate black soldiers.
They couldn't read and write, and we had to teach them reading and writing 13 weeks and send them on to Europe.
But he was well aware back then.
The Army was segregated.
Mr. Stevens' godson, Alvin, hears him talk about that a lot.
He would have been an officer, a lieutenant or a captain because of his educational background.
But he couldn't be because why?
But he couldn't be because of his color.
Frustrated, yes, but never bitter. Just proud of our country.
Oh, I'm very proud. I'm glad to have had a part in making it what it is. And I would like to do it again if I could.
African Americans were not fighting for the America they knew. They were fighting for a better America. The standout accomplishment for African Americans in World War II, I guess I would just say it's everything they did.
The famous Tuskegee Airmen, for example, their P-51s, the Red Tails.
Fighting bravely for a country that treated them like second-class citizens.
Dr. Citino says, think about this.
There are things that you can't do in the American South because this is still the Jim Crow South. There's official segregation.
Black soldiers training on bases in World War II in the United States. They see German POWs, say at Camp Hearn in Texas.
And they're riding at the front of buses or trains. They're walking into restaurants, under guard, of course. They're drinking from the water fountains they want. They can do those things, and you can't because of the color of your skin.
German soldiers who had been fighting for Hitler, for the Nazis, killing Americans.
But they had the golden ticket. They had white skin.
A sour, painful part of our history. But look at Mr. Stevens. He wants to show you his special jacket.
This is an historical jacket. I dined with President Eisenhower in this jacket quite a few years ago. Very historical.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Dwight D. Eisenhower, commander of the Allied forces. Mr. Stevens will never forget meeting him in this exact red jacket. Well, I like talking to you.
Yeah, well,
This is an honor for me, sir.
Well, I'm enjoying talking to you.
It is just such a rare opportunity to sit in the presence of the greatest generation. What would you say about the United States of America?
The most wonderful country in the world.
And age 107,
I was more or less a bass singer.
Yeah. Still, this wonderful bass voice.
From sea to shining sea.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
And we can certainly learn a lot from Mr. Stevens and the guys just like him while we honor and preserve the history of our veterans from World War II. But let's go to a new port of call. From Mayport now to Pearl Harbor.
My sister and I were probably ready to go to church, and we were outside playing.
Bill Worth was only 3, but certain things are unforgettable.
This guy comes jogging up the street saying, "You kids get in your house now."
Worth and his family lived about 6 miles from Pearl Harbor on Honolulu the morning of the attack, and the weeks after were spent in his home, the nights in total darkness.
And they expected, I think, after such a devastating attack, that the next thing that would happen would be a landing force would land on the beaches, arrive virtually unopposed, probably at that point in time.
Terror. They were in the dark, literally, with enforced total blackouts at night, but also figuratively, because they had no idea what was going on with Bill's father, Theodore, who was the executive officer on board the USS Portland. While 2,400 Americans died that day, Theodore and his crew were fortunate to avoid that fate. They had been deployed offshore for exercises. But just a few years ago, a new light was shone on Bill's memories.
I think a treasure trove of things like that. I mean, this is a diary, pen and ink stuff.
His dad kept a journal from his time in the Navy.
A sentimental guy at heart, too.
And long after he had passed away, Bill found the binders in an old chest of drawers.
They couldn't believe what they were hearing on the radio about what was going on in Pearl Harbor.
And now Bill finds himself reading this entry from the diary each Pearl Harbor day.
Sunday morning, 7 December 1941, at about 0900, while engaged in preparing planes for catapulting, we received a dispatch from Sink Pack. "Pearl Harbor is being bombed. This is not a drill." End quote. Never, never shall I forget the horrified awe, the paled faces, the incredulous expressions as this word was passed.
The Japanese had snuck up on the United States, and Theodore and his Portland crew had to just sit offshore, hoping to strike back. Robert Citino is one of the most distinguished World War II historians in the country. Put simply, he says,
but the Japanese wanted surprise. They wanted to shock American planners and military officers, and they certainly did the morning of December 7th, 1941.
Shock and surprise. Two things the Japanese did for sure, as is made clear by the diary entry from when the Portland was finally cleared to come back into Pearl Harbor.
As we steamed through the harbor in the failing light, all hands topside just stood and stared. Gloom was as thick as fog. One wanted to cry.
But Worth had noted in his journal, despite the massive casualties and damage to the fleet, the Japanese still left the repair dry docks intact, and he noted that the fuel reserves on base were left as well. Citino says this indicates one of the crucial mistakes the Japanese made that day.
If they had thought maybe a little more deeply about infrastructure, about the gigantic fuel tanks that were on the Hawaiian Islands that were powering the American fleet, about repair facilities that would repair the ships that had been damaged in Pearl Harbor, so launching maybe a second or third wave against that infrastructure, they might have put the U.S. fleet out of commission for a lot longer than they actually did.
It just brought the U.S. into the war more quickly, and that led to what Citino says was the Japanese' other big mistake.
And that's picking a fight with the United States in the first place.
As for Bill, he and his family moved back to the mainland shortly after. He'd go on to the Naval Academy and was a submariner during the Cold War himself. A true naval historian, dating all the way back to when he was 3, and the rumblings of war were at his doorstep.
That's an insight into what it was like in the days following that attack and how jangled everybody's nerves were.
An insight and connection with his father he may have never had, if not for his historic discovery in that old chest of drawers.
What a treasure to have your dad's own journal in his handwriting about Pearl Harbor. Now to a woman named Julie Balky, and her story comes from one of the bloodiest battles in all of World War II. She has a treasure as well. It's a bit different though. It's in a small bottle.
I told her that I would, and I feel bad that I probably won't.
Julie's mom, a nurse in the Army Corps.
Very, very gutsy.
The day after D-Day, on Omaha Beach, bloody Omaha, 2,000 American soldiers killed, the dead and dying still on the sand.
And she was really scared to death, and she could see the bombs falling from a distance.
She was a rather small woman.
She also had a really big backpack of things that she had to take with her, and she was only 5 feet tall.
But mama to many, whose real mothers were an ocean away.
There was one that she told me about that I never really forgot. He had lost both arms and both legs, and he was still alive, and she just basically sat there and held his hand while he died because there wasn't a thing she could do. He was just bleeding out.
Julie's mom knew her mission was monumental. Freedom in the balance.
Oh, I'm extremely proud of her. How could you not be? After she went through all of that just to make sure that Hitler didn't take over the world.
But then, after the battle, after the war, back home.
She had PTSD for the rest of her life, and that was before we knew what it was.
A flash of lightning.
She was terrified. She would jump into the linen closet.
A boom of thunder, and she'd hide under the piano.
She never got over the bombing.
But Julie's mom lived to age 99. And so for years now, Julie's thought about that promise.
I've had 18 surgeries on my back.
It's just hard for her to get around.
I promised her that I would go and see Omaha Beach before I died. I don't think that's going to happen because I married a pastor and we just don't have enough money to travel or anything.
We are actually on the beaches of Normandy. Stretches.
Then she saw us in Normandy for the 75th anniversary of D-Day.
Oh, I was hoping that you might have a little bit of sand that you had gathered.
And on Omaha Beach, I just thought I should take back some sand.
I mean, this is hollow ground.
It is the one place on Earth.
Yeah. Wow, this is great.
Julie tries to picture her own mom.
Ah, that's wonderful. And it's in a little heart. I wish I could sprinkle some on my mom. Who knows, she might have had it in her hands. So it means an awful lot. I plan to keep this as long as I live. It's in a place where I can see it every day. And when I'm gone, I want my daughter to put it in my casket.
Oh, Julie, what a tribute to your mom, above and beyond your promise.
And there's really no doubt Julie's mom had extraordinary courage. We'll be right back.
So the phrase gung-ho, everybody knows what it means. It means someone who's enthusiastic, a hard driver. It can even be used, ironically, for someone maybe who's a little too enthusiastic. But, like so much of our language, it comes out of World War II.
You're watching a First Coast News special presentation, Voices of Valor. Sponsored by ViStar Credit Union, proud supporter of the military and veterans since 1952.
And welcome back to Voices of Valor. I'm Lewis Turner. So, from the beaches of Normandy to the decks of ships serving in the Pacific Theater, Being in World War II took extreme guts. Now, imagine doing all of that underwater.
Archie Holty thinks of rain showers a bit differently than most would.
One time we was going through Lombok Strait, we was laying out there to go through. We go through at night. You had to go through at night because they can shoot at you both sides.
As a submarine vet from World War II, they'd go days underwater without ever seeing the sky, let alone the rain. But since theirs is known as the silent service, and attacking ships used sound to track what was down below,
I think he was a depth charge factory because, boy, he really laid it on us.
The Japanese destroyer raining down a cloud of depth charges, Holty and his crew were some of the first to pierce the Pacific front. It was the submarines that really led the way against Japan in World War II. A good portion of the American surface fleet had been disabled in the attacks at Pearl Harbor, yet the Japanese, for some reason, never bombed the subs or the fuel reserves. So it was guys like Holty and Antonio Faella, affectionately known as Bubbleheads, who were able to get out first.
When the war broke out, actually about the only thing we had out there was submarines that kind of held the front until, kind of held the Japanese off until the surface craft arrived.
And that had some devastating impacts. Keith Post is a submariner himself, a historian, and runs the Sub Museum in St. Mary's, Georgia.
The submarine force suffered the highest rate of casualty of any of the branches in the war. And typically, if a boat went down, all 80 guys went down. You didn't survive that.
Well, I think about how horrible it must have been for them to go down. You know, I think back when I was depth charged too, you know, and luckily we made it. And those poor guys didn't.
Often it did take luck, or maybe some divine intervention to survive in those situations.
About 1 out of every 5 submarines that left on a war patrol didn't come back. So it's a remarkable testament to the true grit of those guys.
Archie's sub had nowhere to hide. They just had to sit and wait in total silence. Would the Japanese ship finish them off?
And if he'd have made one more run, he'd have probably blown that hatch off. But a typical rain shower come in, and he couldn't hear us. We got away from him.
The rain, just loud enough to hide their movements. A shower some may take for granted is why he is sitting here today.
Grace of God.
That's right. Right.
The rain shower saved your life.
Right, or I wouldn't be here.
Thank goodness the Japanese attack spared our subs at Pearl Harbor, but the shock of that attack takes us to this book, and page 37. As you'll see, this is the powerful drawing. The details of this, I just never knew.
My parents told me that I was scribbling ever since I was 5 years old. It's good therapy because then I forget about everything else that was sad, you know? It helps me to forget the problems that we had.
Is that your mom?
My mother. That's my father.
He went to the University of Chicago to be a chiropractor.
And then who was this?
That's me.
You're not very smiley.
Because I was told to sit on that chair and look at the camera.
A strict family with big dreams. Lorraine, born in San Francisco, a U.S. citizen.
I just felt proud, you know.
Proud to be an American.
Yeah.
A state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Then everything changed.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Her father?
Well, he was very, very shocked.
But even more shocking, orders to pack up and get on a bus.
How long did they give you to move out and go to the
24 hours.
Did you have a suitcase?
No.
So in your arms you had
whatever we could carry.
Even like underwear and shoes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
120,000 Japanese Americans were rounded up and put into internment camps. Lorraine could hear people crying and confused.
Well, why are they doing this to us? They have built barracks, army barracks. Some people were put in horses' stalls.
Stalls with hay and horse manure, and always guards and guns.
It was prison.
Lorraine, 13 years old, 2.5 years inside the barbed wire. A dark time she's sketched out in this book.
This really hit me.
This drawing here, no shower curtains.
Yes, the first time I ever saw my mother naked.
Over time, privacy improved with shower curtains and doors, but the injustice still cuts through her.
It's wrong.
Even when she hears, well, the attack on Pearl Harbor scared people back in 1941. What if you were spies?
Can you understand that at all? Or
no.
It wasn't until 1990 that President George H.W. Bush apologized for the United States. Lorraine printed his letter in her book.
We can never fully right the wrongs of the past.
The U.S. government did pay reparations.
I got myself $20,000.
But money doesn't erase memory. So she paints, a sort of therapy for her. And one more note, Lorraine's brother Lawrence joined the military, like many Japanese Americans, a commitment historians now put into perspective for us. Young men
willing to go off and risk their lives for America at a time when their mothers and fathers and grandparents and cousins and brothers and sisters were still locked up in internment camps.
Dr. Rob Citino, senior historian, the National World War II Museum, he says, in fact, one unit of Japanese Americans,
the 442nd, for its size, the most highly decorated unit in U.S. military history. It's about a 4,000-man unit or so, and 21 of them were awarded the Medal of Honor in the course of the fighting. No other unit in World War II certainly even comes close.
As for Lorraine's brother, he served our country in Germany in World War II in the United States Army. A statement, Lorraine says, of loyalty over bitterness.
Now that right there is true loyalty and love of the United States of America. Jeannie, thank you so much. Now, we are here, Naval Station Mayport, where thousands of sailors are at the ready to go to war at any time, with the highest technology built for the 21st century.
But back in World War II, as this next veteran will show you, they had nothing that even came close.
He is the pride of Callahan.
I'm going uphill now.
Talk about spunk.
Elliot Jones Jr.
Age 96.
Every Christmas parade, they cheer me on and clap and yell when I go by them.
So let's go back to 1942.
So did the girls tell you you had pretty eyes?
Oh, yeah.
I knew it, I could tell.
I've had them way down here. Oh, look at your eyes. Blue eyes.
And those blue eyes need a bit of help now seeing things.
Honorable discharge papers.
You're proud of that one, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Jones was a signalman, 3rd class U.S. Navy.
Da, dit, da, da, dit, da, da, dit, dit, da, 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 dit, dit.
And what'd you just spell?
Elliot.
Still knows that Morse code.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
You're seeing Mr. Jones at West Nassau High School, explaining that signals with flags or lights were crucial to other ships. You did not want the enemy to hear you by radio. A lesson from World War II.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
The school asked me to come show our D-Day special.
We were all crying.
Students learning to respect.
Mind if I take a picture with you?
Teacher Susan Winters.
Everything comes back. of what these men did and how just wonderful heroes they are.
So, Mr. Jones and all the other sailors in World War II, why such respect?
Anchors away, Jeannie. I'll tell you why. It was the Navy that was projecting U.S. power. You want to project power, you build a world-class fleet. And that's what the United States did to win the war.
Navy battles that changed the world. If you all would stand up and give these gentlemen a well-deserved standing ovation, what do y'all think about that? I'm just thrilled to see West Nassau High honor Mr. Jones and all of our World War II veterans.
Jesus loves, I sing that every morning.
They are treasures, and of all World War II veterans, only 3% are still with us.
Yes, Jesus loves me, for the Bible tells me so.
So terrific to see these students learn from Mr. Jones about what he and others did for our country during World War II. And check this out. This local newspaper hangs on the wall at their school. The headline, Unconditional Surrender. But that didn't happen until the United States took some drastic action. More on that from a veteran who was actually there when we come back. Welcome back to Voices of Valor. Now we take you to the end of World War II. By July 1945, the war in Europe was over, but Japan had not surrendered. What happened next changed all of that. That's when a young sailor named Billy found himself in the aftermath of the atomic blast in Hiroshima. That handsome young man right there.
17 years old.
I just wanted to be a sailor.
Just a young kid from Florida.
And that's the dog tag you wore all the time.
He had no idea what he would see.
When I joined, it was 1944.
Bill Crawford had never even left home before.
My mother started naturally crying a little bit. You know what? Little old Billy boy cried a little bit too.
He became an electrician's mate on this minesweeper.
My duty was right down there.
His regiment off the coast of Japan. But then, a totally new assignment.
The end of time, that's what we referred to it. The people that were gone, there's no trace of them. And so I was seeing some things that I never thought I would witness.
On the ground in Hiroshima.
Around the face, around the shoulders, around the head.
Bandages, everyone in white bandages. Everyone in a daze.
They were wounded, they didn't know what happened.
This is Bill standing in Hiroshima. It's only 30 days after the atomic bomb.
You go from a young boy at that age, I'm still 18 years old, you know, and that's not very old to be exposed to what we're around.
Some Japanese spoke English.
I happened to talk to one man.
And now, at age 93, Bill tells me it's a conversation he cannot forget. The man said he'd lost his friends, his family.
They were gone, you know, they were gone, disappeared.
When he said disappeared, it wasn't like their bones were still there or their flesh was burned up.
Nothing. You don't see nothing. You don't see nothing but black ashes. The atomic bomb just vaporized people.
And so to that man.
I said to him, well, what do you think about all this you see here? He looked me right in the face and said, the world no more.
And then 3 days later, Nagasaki. In all, several 100,000 dead and wounded. This woman burned in the pattern of her kimono. But for many, it was a horrific death later from radiation poisoning. So, right or wrong decision?
And yes, that question always comes up.
let's say we don't drop the bomb.
Dr. Rob Citino, senior historian at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans.
So what do we do?
One option, land invasion.
Truman once said that he was worried about the invasion of Japan turning into one Okinawa after the other.
President Harry Truman horrified over Japan's willingness to keep fighting and let their people die. Dr. Citino says, look at this. Okinawa. Soldiers killed 12,000 Americans, 100,000 Japanese, plus 80,000 civilians. So right or wrong, no end to this debate. However, for this veteran, a strong view. Bill says if we had not dropped the bombs, if he had been sent to fight on land in Japan.
I may not be alive here now.
But now, 75 years later, he's a proud World War II veteran, grateful he could come home to America.
We've been hanging around with each other 67 years.
And to the best prize of all.
I'm Chief Petty Officer Dustin Holkenberg, stationed aboard USS The Sullivans, DDG-68 in Mayport. You're watching Voices of Valor.
Welcome back to Voices of Valor. Lou and I just want to say that we are so grateful that we've been able to sit down and listen to our veterans. I hope you've learned a lot. I know we have.
It's so sad to think that only 3% of our World War II veterans remain with us today. So now we're going to take a moment and honor those who have passed since we met them before the pandemic began.
So how proud of your country are you?
Oh, I'm very proud. I'm glad to have had a part in making it what it is, and I would like to do it again if I could.
I was flying along, and all of a sudden I hit this rough air, and before I knew it, I had lost 2,000 feet. It was a lot worse than a lot of people realized.
Standing here on the deck of the ship, you just cannot help but think about its motto. It is everywhere, from the t-shirts and in the galley. And it goes back to the 5 Sullivan boys. We stick together.
And it became a rallying cry for all of America, not just the military. Because when you talk to these veterans, they say the same thing. We did what we had to do. And everybody helped, everybody. I remember my mom telling this story. My grandma Esther took a job in a heavy machinery factory. My mom says it was the first time she ever saw her own mother put on a pair of pants.
It has been an honor and a privilege to bring you Voices of Valor. And from all of us here at First Coast News, good night.
This has been a First Coast News special presentation, Voices of Valor, sponsored by ViStar Credit Union, proud supporter of the military and veterans since 1952.